Tonight, Scott Snyder takes a look at Frank Miller's Year 1 and says, Psh, I could do that. Threshold goes completely off the rails in its final issue, and Suicide Squad pulls out the 80s power ballads, and I gotta say, it's just delightful. All that and more tonight on the Not So New 52. Hello everyone and welcome to episode 102 of the Not So New 52. I am your host, and do you remember at the beginning of the New 52, the whole reason they named it that is because there were 52 new books, and they made this little decree, there shall always be 52, no more, no less. So when they canceled off Wave 1 books, they then brought in Wave 2 books immediately, enough to replace them. Same thing for Wave 3. But now we're approaching Wave 5, and they've kind of fallen off the wagon because here's the thing. I use a deck of cards as my bookmarks in these trade paperbacks because there are 52 cards in a deck of cards. It just works out perfectly. And I've got a little pile here of all the cards that do not currently have a book to go in. There's 7 of them, which means that by my calculations, we're at 45 books. What are you doing, DC? You gotta get up to 52. You're less than 2 years out. Just barely, but you're still less than 2 years out, and you're not replacing these books anymore? Yeesh. Alright, anyway, that was just my little tangent. I nothing to do with anything. I just found it interesting. Anyway, this week, we have a bunch of comics to talk about. So, no particular order here. We have Batman, Batgirl, Nightwing, Superboy, Green Lantern Corps, Threshold, Justice League of America, Katana, World's Finest, Suicide Squad, Constantine, and Demon Knights. Books of note that you might want to check out in this episode. Justice League of America will be the first one we do because that is a next part of Trinity War. It is okay, but more on that when we get to it. Additionally, we have 2 comics that are ending this week, final issues. We have Threshold, which just completely went off the rails. And I'm also going to be talking about the backup to Threshold for at least the last 3 issues while I talk about Threshold itself. So that's an extra length little discussion to have there because it's nutty. It's crazy the lengths they went to in that. And the other one, sad to see it go, is Demon Knights. The final issue of Demon Knights came out this week, and for anybody who knows anything about the New 52, if you ask anybody what were the highlights of New 52, Demon Knights is almost always on the list, and it definitely is for me. So definitely check out all of my Demon Knights reviews, but also specifically this last one here. Beyond that, it's just kind of a bunch of normal stuff going on. Unfortunately, Superboy and Katana are in the mix, so ouch, but hey, we don't have to spend that long on them, but I digress. Let's go ahead and jump into this week's comics with, of course, our event comic of the week, Justice League of America. Justice League of America number 7, written by Geoff Johns and Jeff Lemire, art by Doug Mahnke. This is the next part of Trinity War. Last part was Justice League Dark, I believe. It was just everybody going off in different directions, but the main thing that happened was a tie-in to, I think it was Phantom Stranger. That was the thing that happened, and it's actually kind of required for this. But anyway, this one opens up on Lex Luthor reading a newspaper as he's surrounded by lawyers, and lawyers are like, Lex, buddy, we've done amazing things. We can get you out of here as a free man tonight. You will get your entire company back. You will get this wiped from your record. You are totally free. What in the hell could you be reading that's more important than that right now? And we see the headline is Superman accused of manslaughter. And Lex is like, somebody's framing Superman, and it's not me. So I'm super interested. All of you guys are fired. I don't want to hear any of this right now. And they're like, what? But you could just walk out. Zep, fired. So they all leave, and Lex is left alone in there, and he's trying to figure out who did this to Superman. And all of a sudden, mystical voice pops up behind him, and of course it's Pandora. And Lex is like, look, if you expect me to be impressed by you just appearing in this room, I've seen a man fly. So, and she's like, yeah, okay, so I'm Pandora. I have a box. I want to put the sins of the world away. This is my box. Touch my box. And then we cut to Washington, D.C., Argus, where the body of Dr. Light is being kept, and we see someone is sneaking her way in as everyone else is distracted with other stuff. For instance, Amanda Waller's like, yeah, no, I lost control of the Justice League of America. They went off and helped Superman. Like, this sucks. I have nothing to do now. But we see that the woman sneaking into the morgue is being led by, I think his name is like it's the dude running the Secret Society. They never say his name, save for like one issue, like 7 weeks ago. But either way, this is Plastique. And she's like, hey, yeah, I'm at the body. I've set this bomb. We're good. So then we go back to Pittsburgh, where we meet Dr. Psycho, who has already at this point made numerous appearances in Superboy, and he doesn't look like this. So someone's going to have to square that circle pretty quick here. But regardless, Dr. Psycho's taking a bunch of people captive. And he's like, yeah, I can look into all your minds, and I've looked for someone who has no badness in them at all, and none of you are it. All of you are bad, so I'm going to use my psychic powers to force you to kill each other. And then all of a sudden, Martian Manhunter busts into his head, and it's just like, Dr. Psycho, we're here. And he's like, oh, no. And all of a sudden, the team that I want to say Batman's leading, but Batman's not here. So, oh, no, this is Superman's team. Superman's team busts in. Green Arrow, Metamorpho, Firestorm, the Atom, Question, Cyborg, and Martian Manhunter. That's all of them. They busted in there like, hey, we need to talk to you, Dr. Psycho. And so immediately they bust down. They save the people. They were strapped to bombs, and Firestorm just immediately dismantles them. Green Arrow tries to take out Dr. Psycho with a regular arrow, but it turns out Dr. Psycho was playing tricks, and it was actually Cyborg, and the arrow was explosive. So he fires that off at Cyborg. Of course it does nothing, because Cyborg is made of new god tech, and Dr. Psycho makes his way trying to escape. But soon, Superman, looking positively sick, just busts in through the wall and is like, Dr. Psycho, I think you did something to me. And he's like, oh, geez, I didn't do anything. You look awful. And so Superman passes out in front of Dr. Psycho. Dr. Psycho's like, wait a minute, this is my chance. And he starts going through Superman's mind, and he's like, all right, I got it. Smallville, your name is Clark Kent. And Martian Manhunter walks up behind him and goes, okay, you're going to have to forget that part right away. And so he immediately delves into his mind and is searching for answers as to what happened. So then back at the House of Mystery, the events of the Phantom Stranger tie-in happened, where Phantom Stranger took Batman and crew to try to interrogate Dr. Light's soul. But we see Simon Baz, Steve Trevor, Flash, all the rest of JLA is outside of the house trying to bust their way in. And Catwoman just steps up and is like, hey, boys, I talked to the house because clearly it's a magical house, and I just asked it if we could go inside. And she opens up the door, and it's like, all right, well, fine, we'll do it your way. So they make their way in. There's like a feast ready for them, and Trevor's like, don't trust that feast. And it's like, nah, the house is cool. We're just gonna trust it. And so they go to a mirror and they say, hey, can you tell us what happened to Phantom Stranger? And Phantom Stranger's like, hey, things did not go well for me in my book. I can't come back, but I have enough power to send Batman, Deadman, and Katana back. So they all bust through the mirror. So we go back to Superman's team. Martian Manhunter is interrogating Dr. Psycho. And basically he's like, yeah, the Secret Society sent me to Kahndaq that day. They said to await my orders. I never got any orders, and I never did anything to Superman. And now after the fact, I'm realizing that they sent me to Kahndaq to take the fall for Superman. Like, they knew that you would piece it together. So yeah, I didn't do anything. And everyone's like, all right, well, that's that. What do we do now? And Superman's like, okay, Wonder Woman was going after Pandora's box. Maybe she was right. We should probably meet up with her. And the Atom at this point chimes up and be like, guys, I have to confess something. I worked for Amanda Waller. She implanted me on the Justice League in order to spy on you because the Justice League of America was made to fight against the Justice League. And Metamorpho's like, "Oh no, you were our friend. How dare you do this?" And she's like, "I'm really sorry, but I swear I didn't want to hurt any of you." So at that point, Cyborg and Superman are like looking at the JLA of Green Arrow and Martian Manhunter, and they're like, "Oh, so you guys are liars?" And he's like, "Yeah, well, I mean, we didn't know about it until literally the time that we were going out to stop you. So sorry." And Martian Manhunter's like, "Okay, I kind of knew, but I have my own reasons. You got to trust me on that one." So at that point, everyone's like, Amanda Waller's being a little bit shady. How about we go check in on her? So then back in Lex Luthor's cell, Pandora holds out the box and is like, "All right, go ahead, Lex. Save the world." And Lex is like, "Oh, this is going to feel good." And as he goes to reach for it, she gets yanked away from Lex by Wonder Woman's lasso, Aquaman, her whole team. And Wonder Woman's like, "No, we're taking the box." And Lex is like, "If you want the box, I definitely want the box." So they start to fight over it. We see that Phantom Stranger somehow is still in the mirror saying, "Everyone, before I fade away into nothingness, we've all been tricked. The box is not the box. It's something else." And we see that the Superman's team goes after Waller. They start getting on her, trying to figure out what's going on. The Secret Society sets off the bomb, which explodes underneath Superman's team's feet, so they're all out for a while. Everyone sees Phantom Stranger is totally dead. Wonder Woman gets her hands on the box, and she turns evil. And that's where we leave off. I mean, it's good. It's a fine next part of the book, but I still don't feel like we're doing anything. It feels like this is less an event and more of the pieces being moved into place for the real event, which, no spoilers here because at this point it would have already been announced. Forever Evil is the real event. That's clearly what we're going towards here. Trinity War is just kind of a stepping stone where we're just saying, "Hey guys, turns out we are a connected universe and we can have these people talk to each other." So it's not bad, but it's like calling this an event within itself just feels dishonest at this point. Beyond that, Wonder Woman being evil, she looks fine. She just looks like normal Wonder Woman, but she's got an eye on her bandana, crown, whatever you want to call that, tiara, and she has a much cooler sword. But beyond that, I really have nothing else for it. Being an okay issue, not fantastic. Wanting to see how that Dr. Psycho thing is going to shake out, considering that character is not the same character. I'm going to give this one I'll just give it a flat 7. The art's still great. I think it looks great, but it's just an event full of, and we're building, and we never actually get anywhere. Batman number 23, written by Scott Snyder, art by Greg Capullo. So last issue, we had Batman finally meeting up with Edward Nygma, and then he went back to his apartment, and it exploded because of the Red Hood gang. So this issue is how we turned year one into 0 year. So we see a bunch of cutting back and forth of Bruce being rescued from the cave he fell down in as a child by his father, and also what's currently happening, and also what's going to happen. So just know the cave thing's happening, but what's currently happening is the apartment's exploding. Bruce has a bunch of armored statues. He grabs one of the shields off of it and barricades himself to defend from the explosion, and gets busted through a wall. And we see when he lands on the outside, he's helped up by the leader of the Red Hood gang, and he's like, "Oh yeah, no, cool weapons and stuff. The whole reason could have saved you. We could have some fun together." And he spits at Red Hood leader, and all the other Red Hood gang members start beating the ever-living crap out of him. And Red Hood 1 explains, "Hey, the day your parents died is what inspired me, because seeing your parents, these paragons of Gotham, struck down by a random crime, it made me realize that that's the thing people fear the most, is the randomness of it all. The fact that they could just be destroyed like that. That's why I made my gang the way I did, where it is just pure randomness, an empty center. You don't know any of us. There's no one to prosecute." So he goes on and on and on. He's basically like, yeah, no, there's currently this guy who thinks he's better, but in the end, the chaos always wins. So we'll get him sooner rather than later. So he takes down the portrait of Bruce's parents, shoots both of them in the head, and is like, yep, and maybe tonight someone will be inspired by your death of a random house fire. See ya. And they all leave, leaving Bruce bleeding out on the floor. So we see Bruce trying to crawl his way over to a bookcase. He gets behind it. He sees his entire back room is on fire as well. It's being engulfed in the explosion. And he barely manages to make his way out before it explodes. And the thing that's happening in the future that's been overcut with all of this is that Bruce stumbles his way to the gates of Wayne Manor. He smashes the lock off with a rock, and he gets his way in through the front door and just basically falls over because of blood loss on the ground. So the last words there are, "It'll be over soon." Okay, it's finally over, and he collapses on the ground. So then we see back at Wayne Tower, the green question mark from Nigma's office goes through the window, and we see that Philip Kane is holding Nigma at gunpoint, saying like, dude, you shot Bruce. Bruce Wayne was not supposed to be killed. I could have convinced him. And Nigma's like, no, you couldn't. He was totally going to take the company from you. There's no way you were ever going to do it. It was like 2 moves away. I did you a favor. And Kane is just super pissed off about this. He's like, okay, what happens if I kill you now? And he's like, unlikely. You wouldn't want people asking questions, especially with someone like me on your payroll. And he's like, yeah, well, we've kept you centralized to just this room, and I have an electromagnet underneath your office that can wipe all your computers with just a secret code word. And he's like, very well thought out. I guess you've got the one up on me now, but what if I just happen to say the secret code word is Kane? And then the steel plate inside of Philip Kane's head is attracted to the electromagnet, and it keeps him held down to the ground. Why you would make your super secret special password your last name, I don't know. But regardless, Riddler's like, yeah, okay, take this as my resignation. I'm going to go over to Powers Company and see if they want my surprisingly large intellect. See ya. And as he's leaving, Philip Kane just tells him like, you got to stay in the shadows though. What's the point of all your intellect if you got to stay in the shadows? You're nothing but an empty question mark. And Riddler's like, that gives me an idea. So we see Bruce coming to. Alfred is sewing him up, and he's like, I'm sorry, Master Bruce, I'm very rusty. But as Bruce sits up, he's like, look, here's the thing. I know that we've partied on bad terms before, but I was a soldier. I was a medic out in the field. I saw people who were told that there was no way they were going to survive, and I still had to do my best. I still had to fix them. Regardless of if I agree with you or not, I will be here to patch you up, no matter what happens. So he hands Bruce a blanket, and Bruce walks away. He walks throughout the manor, and we see night has fallen. He goes through, he looks at some of his parents' old mementos, and he goes about analyzing, and finally he makes his way into the library, and he sees the bust of his dad, and he's like, Dad, I'm not doing all right, man. I'm trying, and I need some guidance here. Alfred says I need to be more, but what is it? What do I need to be? Just tell me. And we see that he pulls out something that he had before, was the little hologram ball that he dropped down in that cave from like 3 issues ago, and he accidentally activates it. And as he's standing in the library, the entire library is mapped with the hologram of the Bat Cave, and he sees an open window nearby. And as he looks he sees the video recording of all the bats that attacked him flying through the window, and they pass through his chest because they're just holograms. And he's like, yes, I understand now. And he sits down in the chair, and he looks at the bust of his father and says, yes, Father, I shall become the Bat. So the hologram ball breaks. The bat is the one. There is a real bat that made its way in. It's sitting on top of his father's bust, and he just sits there staring at it in the dark. And that's it. That's the issue. So here's the thing. I read year 1. That is straight up Just year one. That's like, because year one had that perfect moment. It was like he's bleeding out. He doesn't know like what he's supposed to do. He needs to become something more. And then the bat busts in through the window and he becomes Batman. That's the moment. Do I think this improved it? No. I think that this realized that the bat busting through the window was itself a perfect moment. This is just trying to do something a little bit different. It's not better. It's not that much worse, though. I think that it's pretty on par. It's just a tiny bit too much. You know, you kind of want the moment before he becomes Batman to be this, like, deep, personal, like, this is it, this is it. Adding in the weird hologram ball just seems like a bit much. That's my personal opinion. But I do think that in the end, the hologram ball breaks. He's left sitting there in the dark. It's practically the same moment at that point. Though I do like the idea that he was bleeding out in year one and that he would have died if he didn't come to that conclusion. Here he's already been patched up, so 50-50 on that. So overall, decent issue, not awful. I do think that the next time we come back, Batman 24 is probably going to be the better issue because it's going to take that time to really solve out, like, here's Batman's first appearance. Like, that's going to be it. There's no way that we can come back and it's not going to be him in full back gear. So I'm going to give this one and I was going to say 8, but I think I convinced myself down to a 7.5. So 7.5, perfectly okay, but it was going up against an all-time classic. There was no way it was going to win out. Batgirl number 23, written by Gail, Simone, art by Fernando, Pasarin. So this is the start of a new arc called Batgirl Wanted, but it is pretty much just an evolution of the prior arc. So the way that the last issue wrapped up is basically Jim Gordon punched Batman and said, I'm coming after Batgirl. And Batgirl, of course, stripped herself of the name Batgirl because she killed her brother. So this picks up at the place where Nightfall, you remember Nightfall from like half a year ago? We're back on her. And Gordon and Detective McKenna are going, and she's like, oh, hey, what a surprise, Gordon. Here to stick me with more charges that are clearly fraudulent. McKenna's like, oh, we had you dead to rights. Don't even act like you didn't kill those people as Nightfall. She's like, I have no idea what you're talking about. Anyway, so Gordon's like, look, here's the thing. We're not after you. You beat the charges, so be it. But we know that you have run into Batgirl several times. We would like to see your security footage because we're interested in her. So she's like, oh, that's right, your son died. I remember reading about that. I'm so sorry. I'm here to give you anything you need. And he's like, yeah, thanks. Just the footage, though. So she instructs her sidekick to get all the footage, and then she's left with her other two lackeys, and it's like, okay, there's like a 50% chance that he's just playing us and he's actually working with Batgirl to take us down. So we got to keep a special eye on him. But right now, let's go ahead and play it extra careful. So we see that Batgirl and her roommate Alicia are out shopping because she's like, oh, yeah, it's been so long since I've been able to just enjoy myself. And Alicia really does a great job at that. And so they make their way through the mall. And soon they are accosted by a couple of punks who are trying to get their attention. Like, hey, baby, you look good tonight. And Alicia's like, don't worry. They'll get bored when we don't respond. Just keep walking. But they keep on following. They keep on pushing. Eventually, they're like, oh, what's the matter? You think you're too good for us? Oh, maybe you guys are a couple. Well, I got something that can fix that. And Barbara just snaps. She grabs a plate from the food court, breaks it on a table and starts holding it and be like, oh yeah, you want this now, huh? And then she's like, Jesus, okay, crazy. And they run off. And obviously Barbara like flashes back because the shard she had looks a lot like a batarang, and she flashes back to how she killed her brother. And Alicia's like, okay, maybe let's go home. So we cut to later on. Gordon and McKenna are in the car and they're just staking out, keeping an eye on things. And McKenna's like, hey, Gordon, I never really pegged Batgirl as a killer. That seems weird. Are you positive that she wasn't like forced into a situation where she had to kill your son to like save a life or something. And he's like, no, I watched it myself. That's not what happened. So stop with your stupid theories. And she's like, okay, yeah, sorry, whatever. So at that point, they get a file and they say, all right, our next person we need to interview is someone that we know has been in contact with Batgirl, Ricky Gutierrez, which is, of course, the person who is currently Barbara's boyfriend, question mark. But he's, of course, fallen into his own stuff, as last issue, Barbara went on a date with him and they beat up some gang members. The gang members have decided to get revenge, and they have Ricky's brother and have called him up and said, Ricky, we're going to kill your brother, and you got to come down here and, like, say goodbye to him, obviously intending of, we'll let him go if you come down here yourself. And then if you don't do it or the cops show up, we'll kill your mom. So Ricky says, all right, crap, I got to go. Go stay at Aunt Cynthia's house. I got to take care of this. And his mom starts freaking out. He calls up Barbara. Barbara's just getting home from shopping, and she's so happy and whatnot. And he's like, hey, yeah, we're probably not going to see each other again. Just know that I really did try. Click. And so she's like trying to call him back, trying to get anything. Turns out that as he's got his gun packed and he's trying to walk out, that's as Gordon and McKenna are coming up. And so he goes out the fire escape. McKenna was already there waiting, thinking he was going to try to run. He pushes her out of the way, and she hits her head on the metal bar and gets knocked out. And Gordon kicks open the door. He thinks like, oh, this guy just like assaulted an officer, took him out. So he calls in backup. He calls in an ambulance for McKenna. And as he goes back inside, he sees a photo of Barbara and Ricky on the table, and he's just like, oh God, Barbara, what did you get into? So Barbara reveals that she put a GPS tracking device, like an app, on his phone, so she's already coming down to try to get him. He's trying to run into the building where his brother is, as he is caught by two cops who heard about his description over the radio. They start going after him. They're about to fire, and Barbara comes in, not wearing her Batgirl gear, but wearing enough to cover her face, and starts kicking the crap out of the cops. And he's like, oh, geez, I was at this guy's wedding. Why am I doing this? So Ricky goes in, gun trained on the gang member, and it's just this whole thing where the gang member has a special, like, alien gun that he purchased off the black market that apparently doesn't kill, it disintegrates. So he's going to disintegrate the flesh off of Ricky's brother's face. And Ricky's brother is like, don't do it, get out of here. Like, let him do what he's going to do. And he's like, I'll get your mom in that case. And so Ricky's like, fine, whatever. Here I am, do what you got to do. And Barbara is up on the skylight at this point, and she busts in and is just like, all right, got to take care of this short and sweet. So we see across town, Nightfall is getting word of the cops coming up on this location. Nightfall is apparently the one who supplied the guy with the alien gun, and so they're like, crap, all right, he's going to be an issue. Also, the fact that they're closing in on him, that makes it seem the reason that they know that we supplied him with the gun, so therefore they're coming after us. And Nightfall's like, you're right, clearly we're at the center of this. So she goes after, she's got a criminal already pegged here, just snaps his arm and says, don't do it again, and walks away. So we see that Ricky, whole gunfight is broken out once Barbara busted in. Everyone's shooting at each other. Barbara's taking out a bunch of goons. Ricky's trying to save his brother. Finally, all the gang members are down, except for the one with the alien gun. He's got the gun trained on the brother. Ricky has his gun trained on the gangster. The cops have busted in, and they've got all their guns trained on Ricky. And Barbara's standing there like, sir, who you clearly don't know is me, don't do this. Put down your gun or they're going to shoot you. And the gangster prods him some more until finally it looks like he's going to take the shot. But first, Gordon takes the shot. Barbara runs in and tries to push Ricky out of the way, but she's too late. Ricky is dead by Gordon. So, Dad just killed my boyfriend. Yeah, no, this is a good issue. This is a solid one in that it's taking these different plot lines. We got the Gordon thing, we've got Nightfall, we've got Ricky, we got all this stuff, and it's all coalescing into one coherent plot of where we're moving forward with. And it's even pulling in from things like the last issue, like the date issue, where I thought that was just going to be a with tiny little, oh, we're doing other things over here and then we'll come back. And it was just kind of a breather issue. But no, everything we did in that issue was to inform this one. So I'll give it to Gail Simone. It was a very well written issue. Art wise, it's good. It's fine. I like Fernando. Sorry, I'm blanking on his name. Pasarin. Solid. I don't really have anything negative to say. It doesn't feel like that huge of an issue either. I do like that we have set Ricky up over the past 6 months. It's been at least since February, because I remember it was in the Valentine's Day issue. So yeah, no, they've done a good job of setting him up as an actual character, and I'm glad that he's finally pulled his weight to be a dead body. So I'll give this one I'll give it an 8. I really do think the writing pulled through on this one. It's a very well written issue. Being the start of an arc, I hope that it continues forward with this quality the whole time. But even if it dips a little bit, solid way to start it. Nightwing number 23, written by Kyle Higgins, art by Will Conrad. So last issue we had Nightwing doing his thing more or less, and then Prankster came out and basically called out the mayor for embezzling funds and keeping Tony Zuko safe. And so he held the entire city hostage along with a bunch of cops that were held at gunpoint. So this issue is some amount of time later. We see that a bunch of Prankster's goons are being beaten up by Nightwing on top of this building. And there's this woman outside who, her name in this is, Danielle. Nightwing talks about her as if she's a character that we've met before. I don't know her, so I'm just going to say she's a new character. But regardless, Danielle's slipping outside this window. He's fighting more and more of the goons, throwing out one-liners constantly. Danielle finally slips. Nightwing dives off the building and says, hey, Danielle, don't you go leaving me yet. And he swoops down, he saves her, and she gives him a big kiss, saying thank you so much. And he's just like, oh, well, do what I can. So at that point, we see one of the goons has been tied up. And Nightwing's like, okay, here's the thing. I know that it's you, Danny, because your dreads are stupid. And I just want to know where Prankster held himself up. I will let you fall, though. Do not think I will not do that. And so he basically pushes and pushes Danny, and Danny eventually gives up the location, which is a old brewery on 25th Street. And he's like, there you go. Wasn't that so hard, Danny? Leave for the cops, though. Bye. So we see all of the things that Prankster has done over the past couple days. We see that one of 5 officers escaped the room filled with guns, and then we never get back to that. So I don't know if that was just done with, and the rest of them are dead. Who knows? Lights in the city were overloaded. A Ferris wheel was set on fire. Whole city's on lockdown, and people are protesting, telling the mayor, dude, just give them the money, for God's sakes. And, of course, the mayor stands up and is just like, yeah, no, all of those are false. I didn't take any money. Tony Zuko is not safe. And then the news reporter who's saying all this is like, Tony Zuko, here seen, looking exactly like that guy Billy, is a man who killed the Flying Graysons. And we see Joey, if you remember, Joey is the roommate, is on the news talking with Michael, the other roommate, saying oh, geez, saying that this guy killed Dick's parents. Dick is, of course, living with us. I haven't seen him in 5 days. What in the hell's going on around here? And Michael's like, yeah, I don't know. Just try tracking his phone or something. I'm busy with the police. I got to go. So turns out the police have brought him down because, of course, that one detective wants him to catch Nightwing in the act, more or less. And as they're investigating the brewery, because they all got there before Nightwing, Prankster set his computer to be basically a trap. So when they tried to get into it, it turned on a machine that immediately caused an explosion and just killed everybody there. Everyone there is dead except for Michael, who is grabbed by Prankster, and he's like, oh, hey, one of you survived. Well, you're going to be part of my next prank. So he grabs up Michael. We see Nightwing arrives soon afterwards. He sees that the detective who's after him also managed to survive. And he's like, hey, what's going on? What's happening? It's like, oh, they took Michael, something about a boat. And he looks back and he's like, oh, it's Nightwing. I hate you. And he's like, whatever, dude. I'm going to go deal with this thing that you clearly caused. So back in Gotham, we see that Sonia Branch, the daughter of Tony Zuko, is being accosted because of all the things going on in Chicago. Meanwhile, she's just now finding out that her father is alive. She's just like, "What? What are you talking about? That's insane." Or no, not alive. Is at the center of all of this craziness in Chicago. So then we cut to Wisconsin, where Zuko is, of course, on vacation with his family. His wife comes in and is like, "Hey, should I call you... Sorry, what's his fake name here? Billy. Should I call you Billy or should I call you Tony?" And he's like, "Oh, I did so much to distance myself from that life. You have to understand." And she's like, "No, I understand that you're a good man. Like, I get that. It's why you're the man I married. But you've been lying. You've been lying this whole... How many people have you even killed? And, like, what kind of father is a liar like that to his son? Like, you've been teaching him this whole week about personal responsibility, and you can't even own up to your own mistakes of what's going on in Chicago." And he's like, "Baby, if we go back to Chicago, we are definitely going to die." And it's like, it's better than all the people that are currently dying there now, all because of you. Like, own up to your mistakes. So back in Chicago, we see the boat prank is a yacht that Prankster has put a bunch of people on, and he pours some gas in the water and then lights a flare that catches it on fire. So that's happening. We see some people are inside the mayor's office basically saying, like, "Look, we don't care about the Tony Zuko thing. We don't even care if you took the money, but, like, find the money and give it to him." And he's like, I don't have it. It's not, I didn't take the money. And he's like, "Yeah, okay, sure. Just like you don't Tony Zuko. We've all met Billy, dude. We've all seen him." So back on the boat, we see the people in the jet ski that are Prankster's people are watching the fire go up as everyone screams for help. And then Nightwing comes up on a speedboat and he's like, "I got a bigger boat." And he swims over to the boat underneath the fire. He gives people some rebreathers and says, like, "All right, one at a time, jump over and follow me back to the boat." So then in the office, we see a bunch of all the people who are yelling at the mayor, telling him to basically do what they need to do and submit to the prankster. They just get shot. Their chests are just blown open. And as the mayor tries to run outside the room, he sees that the prankster is standing there like, "Hey, how have you been?" So finally we get Nightwing. He gets all the people off the burning boat, delivers them back to the shore. He's out of breath. He's tired. Everyone runs off, and a voice comes up, and he's like, "Now here's the thing. Before you say or do anything, I know who Prankster is, and in this case, things are going to get worse before they get better. So you and me need to work together." And we see that the voice is none other than Tony Zuko talking to Nightwing, saying that they need to team up. Because, of course we did. Of course we have this moment where it's like the dude who he came here originally for teams up with him to fight against the bigger bad guy. I'm in. I like it. I mean, I've liked this whole arc, I feel like. It has been a bit slower paced at times, but this was a perfectly fine issue. It's really building up the... I do think this probably could have been 2 issues, if I'm being honest, in that it only took 1 page to say, and then Prankster did all these horrible things. Like, if we took the time to really build out how desperate Chicago was getting to get rid of Prankster, I'd be so much more down. But this is fine. We needed to get to the point, and here we are. So I'm going to give this one I'll give it a 7.5. The only thing stopping me from the 8 is that I feel like there are a few things in previous issues, and also the Michael and Joey stuff, that just they were put in place but have no apparent payoff. Maybe we'll get there, but it doesn't even feel like they're building anymore. That and the fact that, like, all these other costumed heroes were killed years ago in Chicago, that all that just seems like it went by the wayside. If it's for the sake of it'll come up later, so be it. But it does feel like it's a little bit like, why did we do that before if we're not going to get back to it now? So 7.5. Superboy number 23, written by Justin Jordan, art by Robson, Rocha, and Marcus Toe. So last issue was a mess. Superboy enrolled in high school because there's some telepath there, and then by the end of the issue, a bunch of people look like monsters. So This issue picks up, and we see he's still surrounded by monsters. Crypto is on top of him. Where at the end of last issue, Crypto looked like a Resident Evil monster. This one, he just looks like a dog. Couldn't, one page flip here, and just totally different. But regardless, Superboy's like, my God, there are monsters here. I have to fight them all. And then Dr. Psycho comes in and says, hey, no, don't fight them. You're seeing things. It's not them. And he's like, oh God, Dr. Psycho's a monster too. I will fight them all back. So he activates his TK abilities. He throws off Crypto and Dr. Psycho, and then immediately goes after all the monsters. But the monsters just run away. Just gone. They're all sprinting away from him. And they're like, oh, Connor, please, you can't do this. And he's like, oh, no one's getting out of here. So he grips them all with his TK powers. And he's like, wait a minute. You all are struggling, but it's more so to run away rather than to fight me. Maybe I should have listened to Dr. Psycho. So immediately he snaps out of it. He sees that everyone is actually normal. And he's like, hey, sorry about that. And everyone sprints again. He's like, all right, that's fair. So then he talks to Eliza, that girl from last issue. And he's like, Eliza, are you the one doing this? And he's like, I don't know what you're talking about. You're just a freak like the rest of them. So at that point, we see another girl who has weird psychic energy coming off her. And Superboy's like, that's her. I see the psychic energy. I'm going to go get her. So he tries to run after her. Crypto acts as a bloodhound because she dropped her books. So Crypto starts chasing after her. A bunch of people get in the way as they're trying to chase. So Crypto uses his supersonic bark to get them out. And finally they come across the girl. And she ducks into a closet. Crypto just pounces, knocks down the door. But seemingly no one is there. And Crypto gets thrown out of the room. And Superboy is like, oh, Crypto, oh no, my dog, what did you do? And so Crypto's out of the fight. But then through the hole in the wall, we see another copy of Superboy. And he has red glowing eyes. And he's just like, oh, you're about to get it. And Superboy says, all right, cool, finally something I can hit. So Superboy v. Superboy here. They fight each other. They start going through all the walls in the school. And he's just like, I'm hitting it, but it doesn't feel like I'm actually doing anything. But it definitely hurts when he hits me. Something is off about this. And the other Superboy's like, psh, whatever. So he keeps on attacking him. Finally, Superboy lands next to Dr. Psycho and who I think is Eliza, because she's changed her hair since we saw her 3 pages ago. I cannot get over that there is no direction in this art. Between pages, we lose track of what characters look like. It's baffling to me. But regardless, Eliza's taking care of Dr. Psycho, saying oh, you heard him. And he's like, what? How do you even know Dr. Psycho? Whatever. So the other evil Superboy shows up behind Eliza, and he's like, oh, you like her? I'm gonna beat her up. And Superboy goes to throw a punch. Eliza shields herself, and she's like, wait a minute. Why didn't you react to the other Superboy? I'm thinking this might be the same trick as it was at the beginning of the issue. Eliza, hey, look, sorry to scare you. I understand if you're afraid of me. Can I borrow your phone? And she's like, yeah, sure, I guess. She hands over the phone, and he uses the camera on the phone to see that the other Superboy isn't actually there, because clearly the phone camera can't lie. I don't know why his eyes don't just mistake him between the phone and his eyes. That doesn't really make any sense, but regardless, we see that it's actually just the girl causing this. And as he's looking at her, and he's just like, oh, I can see you now. And she's like, no one can see me, no one. And then all of a sudden the hand pops out and grabs the girl, saying, that's enough, Shift. So the girl's name is Shift. And Superboy's like, wait a minute, that's real. What's going on here? And we see standing behind Shift, having knocked her out, is this man who says, I'm Psycho Pirate. Just want to point out, he's wearing a golden mask, which is normal, but the mask has a psychic energy of a bunch of snakes coming off of it, because I believe the name of the mask is the Medusa mask, but this is a dumb interpretation of that. So, Superboy, it's more readable than the last issue, but shampoo bottles are more readable than the last issue. This is just, I don't understand what we're doing here. Okay, and I know I can only say that so many times, but I don't feel like Superboy has a story. I don't feel like it's just a connection of things Superboy has been thrown into and has absolutely no control over. And it's fine if you want to have a passive protagonist, but like, he isn't. He's doing things, but it seems like everything he's doing just doesn't affect whatever it is we're looking at. Like, this entire issue, he was chasing after a girl. We opened up with he can't trust his senses. And then we did it again in the same issue, and he learned nothing. And then by the end of the issue, he doesn't even get to the girl. Someone else shows up and does it. Like, every issue is like this, and it's frustrating me so deeply. So, do I like this issue? No. Do I expect anything better? No. So, I'm going to give this one... I mean, I know I gave the last issue something really harsh. I'm going to give this one a 4. That's just where I'm feeling. It's definitely not above a 5. It's just not good. And I got to say, art is a contributing factor, a major factor on that, because it doesn't feel page to page like there is any sort of cohesive narrative in the art. It just feels like the pages were drawn with one story in mind, and then the words were added in later. So, yeah, 4. Green Lantern Corps number 23, written by Robert Venditti and Dan Jensen, art by Bernard Chang. So last issue, John Stewart's little Corps member group of rookies got captured by some Kundians. Fatality got captured by some Durlans, and a couple of the entities in the rings are apparently dying. That's everything you need. So this issue picks up with the Kundians having taken off all of the Green Lantern's rings. They got him inside of a little jar, and they're like, yeah, so here's the thing. We've got a ceremony. We're going to string you up, slit your throat, and then kill you. Like, sounds good, right? That's what we're going to do. And John Stewart's like, oh, just whatever you're doing, murder is murder. You're just a bunch of thugs. And he's like, oh, hey, you can still speak our language even without your ring. That's pretty cool. We're still going to kill you. So they string up the smallest member, the one who doesn't speak at all, and he's just like, this is just the way we do things. So we see John and Fesca, that was her name, are still bound up in their weird little containment things, and Fesca's like, I've been in tighter situations than this before, I gotta break free. And so she like snaps parts of her body enough to break out of the things, and she makes her way over to the jar where the rings are. The leader of the Kundians is like, what the? Oh, you want in? You want to go first? So be it. And he raises his axe, comes down on Fesca. Fesca puts the jar in the way, and now they have access to the rings. And the lead Kundian is like, okay, well, kill her now before she gets the rings. So back with the Durlians and Fatality. Fatality gets her ring powers back, and she's just like, okay, that was weird. Don't know what happened there. Anyway, I'm ready to fight you all off. And the Durlians are like, you do understand we could kill you at any moment, right? Like, we're just messing around with you for the most part here. And she's like, yeah, okay, prove it. So one of them transforms into like a tiny bug. It starts flying a Fatality. She tries stabbing at it. She's like, why would I be afraid of a bug? And then it goes inside her ear, and she's like, yeah, that thing's called a carrion death wasp. It's going to burrow into your brain. And she's like, what? Uh-oh. And then all of a sudden her nose starts bleeding, and she just falls to the ground. She's like, yeah, all right, well, let's bring her to the surgeons. So back on Oa, we see a bunch of the longer-term Green Lantern members are all eating at the canteen. And they're like, dude, what in the hell is going on? Like, why are our rings failing off? Where is Hal? He's supposed to be our leader. They see Kilowog right by, and they're like, Kilowog, what's going on, man? He's like, I don't know. Like, the rings is totally a mystery. Those were the Guardians' jobs before. And it's like, okay, well, the Guardians aren't here, so whose job is it now? And he's like, I don't know. I can go talk to Scalix. I mean, it might be my job. I was kind of thrown into it. So, or not Scalix, Salak. Scalix is from Red Lanterns. So he goes off to do that, and he's like, yeah, all right, I hate this job. This is literally the worst. So he goes off to find Salak. And Salak's looking through a huge junk pile of the Guardian stuff, saying like, okay, hey, Kilowog, glad you're here. I need to find the mold that all of the Green Lantern rings came from, because there's a chance that the Guardians put in like a fail-safe in the back that they could use to take over us. And he was like, wouldn't they have done that during the Third Army thing? And he's like, I'm not ruling this out. So Kilowog finds it. Salak takes a look. He's like, no, that ain't it. Okay. Well, maybe it's a problem with the central power battery. I got to go check that out. You want to come with? And Kilowog's like, yeah, sure, whatever. So back on Kundia, they've opened fire on the Green Lanterns, seemingly killing them. But of course, they got their rings back. They're fine. And they start charging at the Kundians. They really lay down the punch. We see that the small one, who has been unable to attack at this point, he makes some brutal constructs of his own face and body that like just punch down these guys, unleash like sonic screams, really messes with them all. And so they manage to hold off the Kundians for a little bit. We see that Drux has his axe back, one he stole from the Kundians, and he's like, now I get to finally have my blood right. And at that point, John Stewart's like, up, no killing. Everyone, listen up. Green Lanterns have a bad enough name. No more killing. And Druk's like, dude, come on, man. Fine, whatever. So at that point, they look up. They see an entire Kundia fleet descending on them. And he's like, well, everyone, it's time to learn the most important lesson. Retreat is always an option. So immediately they just all get in a bubble and fly their way off planet. So we see Fatality being strapped down to a table. The Durlans are doing some tests, and they're like, yeah, no, we can't get the ring off. Someone's got to call the boss. I don't know what I'm supposed to do. I can't get the damn ring off. And so Fatality wakes up, the ring's still on her finger. She powers up, breaks out the shackles, and is like, ring, tether me to John Stewart. And so out of her chest comes this tube thing, and immediately she goes off like a bolt of lightning. And the drones are like, wait, no, geez, I'm so fired. So John and them are approaching Oa and just like, okay, hey, everyone, you did a good job. You all did it fine. You're not dead, so that's great. And then all of a sudden he gets zapped with the Star Sapphire energy and falls down to Oa. The other Green Lantern Corps are like, a rival Corps member. You will not get us. Green Lanterns are strong. And John's immediately like, no, she's cool. Fatality, what's going on? And it's like, I am not okay. And she just collapses on him. So he takes her to the infirmary and is just like, yeah, she doesn't have any visible wounds, but clearly something's going on with her. And John talks to Sorinic and is like, yeah, hey, she says she loves me, and we just got a bunch of history. And she's like, I don't, that's not my job. I don't know what to tell you there. And it's like, yeah, no, sorry, or whatever. But the got to get back to my rookies. So he goes back out and he's like, hey, the rings chose you for a reason. You guys did a good job. So congratulations, you're Green Lanterns. Go take a break. So we see the final scene here is Salak is looking at the power battery. The light is dimming. He does notice that. And Kilowog's like, okay, do you know what that means? And it's like, no, only the Guardians really understood. But I can take a look. I can see what I can understand. John comes up and he's like, hey, Kilowog, I thought it was supposed to be an easy job. He's like, what are you talking about? He's like, yeah, no, we got jumped. And he's like, oh, you okay? He's like, yeah, no, whatever. It's done now. Anyway, what's going on with the power battery? And as they're looking at it, all of a sudden, they hear the word help from inside. And out from the battery comes the giant fish that is the entity of the Green Lantern Corps, Ion. And he's like, hey, I ain't doing so hot. And they're like, oh, geez, what's going on, Ion? And then all the other entities, white, orange, I believe, pink, blue, it's just pink and blue. They all come down and they're like, hey, yeah, we're all feeling pretty sick. We're dying. And John's like, oh, what does that mean? He's like, well, that means we're going to go home and we're going to die. So that's that. So yeah, that's the issue. Next issue, I believe, ties in to the relic stuff going on in New Guardians. I think it's its own little mini crossover event. So maybe the Guardian stuff will be wrapped up in that. I'm not sure. But regardless, I think this was a fine issue. It's as I predicted last time. It's just taking a little bit of time to get us introduced to these new recruits of the Green Lantern Corps, get us into a pattern of, okay, here's what this one does, here's what this one does, and then also working in this larger story with the Durlans and with these entities and all this other stuff. So I think it's a finely written issue. My only issue that I have with it is that sometimes John Stewart's face looks weird. It's not all the time, and it's not every character. It's specifically John Stewart, and he just looks weird sometimes. Maybe that's because I have an image in my head of what I expect him to look like, but That's the only real critique I can throw at this. So I'm going to give this one a 7.5. I do enjoy it. Not quite great, amazing. Still good. Still fine issue. So yeah, 7.5. Threshold number 8, written by Keith Giffen, art by Tom Raney and Phil Winslade. So this is the final issue of this, and I'm going to actually cover the final issue itself and the backups that have been over the last 3 issues, because one informs the other and the other informs the one. So talking about just the last issue here. So last time we had Jediah Call was teleported out of nowhere, and then we had this whole like Blue Beetle goes in and grabs the thing. Like it was a whole bunch of plates spinning, and I was saying to myself, this is going to be this huge big ending. I can't imagine how it's going to wrap up. And then we get to this issue, and it goes full Morrison. So we are inside an office building. Jediah is being attacked by a bunch of guards, and then all of a sudden, as he's like pushing him away with Green Lantern constructs, a woman just stands in his way saying like, okay, are you done? Like, we've got an appointment to get to. You got to calm down now. And just like, oh yeah, well, I'm gonna take you down. And he's just like, yeah, okay, sure. Anyway, let's go. So they walk down the halls, and she basically explains, here's the deal. We've been canceled. Like, the show that they are on, The Hunted, has been canceled. So they have no need for this anymore. So they just called him in, and it's just like, yep, well, that's it. There's even a panel in here after the fight scene where it says, we should have expanded that action beat. We've only got one shot at grabbing their attention. Like, this whole issue is a meta thing on how the book itself was canceled by saying that the show was canceled. So they make their way in, and we see that the woman is like predicting things that Jediah is going to say, being like, there, now that we've proven that you don't have free will, can you please come with me and stop being argumentative? And Jediah's like, okay. So we go back to the bar that they've always been hanging out at, all the different members of the quote-unquote resistance. And what's her name? The stealth one. She's like, hey, doesn't it bother any of you that Tamara, his whole plan for the like rebellion is just him making it up on the fly? And they're like, what do you mean? And it's just like, well, he says that this place is a blind spot, but like, it's a bunch of dust and gas. Like, there is no blind spot. Dust can get anywhere. That's the whole way they track you. It's just like, yeah, well, I guess that makes sense. And then as they're doing so, we see the bartender just throws a rag on the ground, and she's just like, all right, everyone, pack it in. And then immediately guards just swarm the place and hold all the rebellion people hostage. And it's just like, yeah, no, she just got the call that they were canceled. She goes out and starts talking to a member of Crimson Thrust, and the guy's like, oh, so what are you going to do for your next gig? And she's like, I don't know, I'll call my agent, I'll have something lined up. And he's like, oh, hey, I didn't get your name. And she's like, I didn't give it. And then she calls up her agent, complains that she wasn't informed that this place was canceled. So Call is sitting in a cell, just waiting, biding his time, and he's like looking at his hands, unable to do anything. And finally he gets up, he's about to leave. Someone comes in saying like, okay, the doctor will see you now. And so Call goes to step out of the cell. He's like, what are you doing? He's like, I'm going to see the doctor. And it's like, no, the doctor is this cloud of medicine that fixes you. Like, it's already in the room here. It's taking care of you. Have you ever been into space, dude? Like, ever? So at that point, he's completely healed. He doesn't, like, his back has been fixed. He doesn't need his Green Lantern construct to make him walk anymore. So the woman teleports back in, and it's just like, okay, yeah, can you drop the whole construct thing and get a more classic look? And she's like, oh, is that a command? He's like, yeah, actually it is. We need you to look more in a part. So he turns back into a normal Green Lantern costume. And they just go walking down the halls. We see in the background, Blue Beetle is being briefed. He's like, I'm telling you, I was just standing in the middle of a hole, and I had like this bottled city up above my head. And then all of a sudden I'm here. What happened? And the guy's explaining like, your plot line wasn't needed anymore. So we just cut it and we're sending you back home. That's it. And he's just like, what? Huh? What are you talking about? So finally, Call gets led into the room that he's supposed to go into, and sitting at the desk is Tom Tamara, whatever you want to call him, the guy leading the rebellion. And he's like, hey, yeah, I mean, this shouldn't be too much of a surprise, right? So I'm the member of the brand management here, and All of this was my stuff. I'm basically the showrunner. I was the one who was really pushing for the Hunted. And Call's like, wait a minute, then what was the whole point of the rebellion stuff? It's like, yeah, we actually didn't have the rebellion stuff for our earliest things, and it turned out that most of the contestants just killed themselves. So we needed rebellion to like not let them kill themselves, give them some hope. That was important. So at that point, Call and Tomorrow start getting into a fight, and he's just like, okay, yeah, I should have seen that coming. You always were a bit more of a testy guy. Meanwhile, Blue Beetle is still being talked down. I'm just like, wait, I still don't get it. What was all this? And he's just like, it was nothing. The show is done. You don't have to worry about it. We're sending you back home. So he gets teleported back on to Earth as Call and Tomorrow continue fighting. Tomorrow gets the one up on Call, and he's just like, okay, here's the thing. You just fought me with your fists. You have a Green Lantern ring. Why didn't you use your Green Lantern ring? And Call's like, well, and Tomorrow explains, like, because I'm the one calling the shots. We decide what you do. So please sit down and shut up. So at that point, they go and sit down, and Tomorrow explains, he's like, okay, the show's been canceled. And Call's like, okay, and Tomorrow's like, here's the thing that we want from you. We want to repurpose you and all of the rebellion people into a new show where you are going to lead this team as sort of like this angsty anti-hero group that's trying to take down the system. And we'll call it Team Cauldron. And it's going to star you, and you'll be taken care of perfectly. And just like, what? No, you can't be serious. Like, you're gonna do that? And he's like, yeah. He's like, why would you do, why me of all people? And it's like, because you're a raging narcissist who's an opportunist as well. And he's like, I mean, you're not wrong, but I don't like it said like that. And then Tomorrow explains, like, yeah, okay, we need a few things though. One, you got to lose this Green Lantern look and go back to your old look. It's something about being unique rather than trying to fit into an already established brand. It's just easier for our marketing people. And also, we need you to play ball. Like, you can't really go out on your own anymore. We're going to need you to listen up to what's going on here. And he's like, and if I say no, it's like, well, then you're going to go the way of Space Cabbie. It's like, who the hell's Space Cabbie? Exactly. So Call agrees. He turns back into his old costume. He gets teleported down to the planet, and as he lands there, he gets shot. He gets shot numerous times in the chest. He falls down, and he dies. And then we see the backup. The first page is the exact same promotional image they had for Team Cauldron, except Call is replaced with Tamara, and it's saying like, ah, yes, we're going to find Saul's killer, insinuating that that's the news show that's replacing it because they're all just opportunists. So the backup, that's something I need to talk about. So the backup follows the detective Star Hawkins, who was in like 3 issues ago, and it's 3 parts. And we open up, by the way, this is by Keith Giffen and Timothy Green II on art. So Star Hawkins is being interrogated by Crimson Thrust, and he's like, hey, why are you looking for the legend? And he's like, because I was hired to. That's the whole thing. It's like, all right, well, explain. And I want to really point out that this backup is very funny because it's just the bickering of Star Hawkins and the head of his robot wife who hates him with every fiber of her being. They've got some great lines. I can't go over like all of them, but they're just funny together. And so he recounts like, yeah, so I was on this detective case getting evidence of someone cheating on their wife or something like that. And it's like huge, disgusting looking aliens that are just smacking on each other. And so they get attacked by those aliens. And as they're getting away with the evidence, they make their way to the bar. And they're like, oh, yeah, another job well done. And as they're out there at the bar, Tamara comes up and he's like, hey, Star Hawkins, I got a job for you. And he's like, no thanks. I've already got my phone here with these photos that are going to pay out big. I'm going to take a vacation. And then Tamara just shoots the phone and all the pictures are gone. And he's like, why would you do that? So he's like, yeah, okay, so here's the job. I want you to go after the legend. And he's like, the legend doesn't exist. The legend, of course, being the very first contestant on The Hunted that never got caught. That was just always able to escape and has been since forgotten about because the showrunners don't like it that they let one get away. So he's like, I want you to go find the legend. So they get into a bit of a fight because Hawkins is upset that he got his pictures destroyed, but ultimately he listens up to Tamara. So then we get the next part of that is that Tamara or Hawkins and his wife walk their way through the town trying to figure out what to do next. Hawkins is just asking random people about the legend, just saying like, hey, what have you heard about the legend? What's up with that? What's going on? And nobody knows anything. Nobody's given up anything. And so the wife points this out like, oh, okay, so you've done absolutely nothing to finish this job. And he's like, no, no, no. I'm asking people so that they will tell other people that there's somebody going around asking about the legend. It's stirring it up so then eventually the people who actually care about this stuff will get back to me. And at that exact moment, they start getting fired upon. And we see that it is Crimson Thrust, the group that has been hunting down people on the hunted. They start shooting after Hawkins. His wife goes into battle mode, starts protecting him. But of course, that's against her will. She's like, yeah, no, guys, I want you to shoot him. But like, first law of robotics, I have to protect him. Please stop me. Please finish him. So at that point, one of them sets off like a kamikaze bomb that seemingly blows up the wife. And Hawkins is like, oh, geez, that's a problem. And we see that he gets zapped by the bartender that they were at, and he's just like, yeah, I got me some good money from Crimson Thrust for doing this. So he gets handcuffed. He's led down this huge flight of stairs by Crimson Thrust. His wife is just ahead now because she was blown up in the explosion. And he's like, why did you even grab my wife's head? And it's just like, she wouldn't shut up. She just kept on yelling at us. We had to do something. So at that point, he asked like, oh, by the way, are we going all the way down to the bottom? And he's like, yep. And so he just throws the head down to the bottom of the stairs and then continues talking to them. And finally, when they get their way down to the bottom, they enter into the room and he's like, you wanted to meet the legend? Here you go. And inside is Lady Styx, the leader of the entire Tenebrian Dominion. She's the legend. So final part here, we have Star Hawkins in front of Lady Styx. He's, being a smartass. He's running his mouth. Lady Styx does not like that, so he gets punched a few times. And Lady Styx explains, yeah, when we first set up this idea for a show, I wasn't going to leave the beta testing to just anybody, so I put myself as the first contestant. And so we tried it out. We saw it worked. I removed myself from the competition, and we made it so that anyone involved would be dead, more or less, so that nobody knew about it. However, legends have spread, and therefore she became the legend without anybody knowing. And it turns out the Crimson Thrust, this team that hunts people, just works for her, straight up. Like, they are employed by the show to keep things interesting. So Star's hearing all this, and his wife's head is like, hey, I'm going to activate my self-destruct feature. Use that to get out of here. It's not going to kill her or anything, but it's at least going to give you a distraction. So do it when I say now. So at that point, she activates it, says now, and it explodes. Star manages to get away. He takes one of Crimson Thrust's weapons to try to delay his attackers a little bit more. And finally, he gets up to the top of the stairs. He shoots the control panel of the door so that nobody else can get out. And when he gets up, he's like, great, I have no idea where I am. And I don't have my wife's head to help me through this anymore. And as he gets up, he sees someone teleporting in right behind him. He turns, he shoots, and he shoots Jediah Call. The Green Lantern just falls down dead before him, and Star's like, oh crap, I wonder how much his bounty is. And that's it. That's how the series ends. That Star Hawkins, PI, killed the main character of the book that he was a backup in. And the whole thing ended up just being like, who cares? Like, it was all canceled, and the book itself acknowledges that. I gotta say, I really do appreciate how meta it gets. It was very well done there. I do think that the backups are very funny. I think that was very much well worth the tying in aspect to it. The entire final issue itself, though, is just fantastic read, start to end, because it is a Morrison issue of it just being like, you don't have free will. Whatever we say goes. We wrote this entire book / show. So I enjoy it. Overall, I'm going to say that the main issue itself is it's a solid 8. It didn't wrap up any of the plots in a meaningful way where it's like, oh, what happened to Blue Beetle? Well, he just left. He was just sent back home. What happened to Lonar and Captain Carrot? Who cares? They weren't important enough. Like, the book actively says this. And that's why I appreciate it so much. As for the backup, the humor is what gets you through it. It's a fantastic backup in that regard. So I'd say backup as a whole probably gets Honestly, it probably gets like an 8.5 for me. I really enjoyed the comedy throughout. So, Threshold, the little book that absolutely couldn't, wraps up in the most meta sense I could ever imagine. And it was fun. Katana number 8, written by Nocenti, art by Alex Sanchez and Fabrizio Fiorentino. So last issue, who even cares? Honestly, it barely even impacts this issue, but Katana's dead husband's soul said, "I'm very disappointed in you." That happened. So we pick up in Japantown in San Francisco, and Katana is looking upon the body of Shun the Untouchable because now I guess she's allowed to for some reason. And we see that she lost her foot, which had like a bunch of, I think, dragons on it, they said. I don't know. It doesn't even matter. So Katana starts looking over the body, and she sees that one of the legs has an arrow on it. And she's like, oh, the Arrow Clan, one of the outsiders, connecting this into what's going on in Geoff Lemire's Green Arrow book, despite how much I don't want that to happen. But she's like, oh, of course there are other weapons clans. That makes perfect sense. But then Shun says, hey, I think I have a tattoo you're going to be very explicitly interested in. And she shows Katana her stomach, and Katana's like, oh my, but we don't get to see that. Then Katana walks down the street, and a bird attacks her, specifically a falcon. And she's like, wow, that bird is fast and strong, and it's a weapon. I will track down whoever has that weapon of a bird tomorrow. And we see the bird returns to its owner high on a building named the Falconer and his falcon. And Falcon says, I'm just going to quote him here. What did you think of our new opponent? She loves her sword. She thinks it can slice through anything. But you are the superior weapon, talking to his falcon. A sword cannot kill everything. It can't kill a falcon. Miss Nocenti, a sword can definitely kill a bird. That's just the thing. Anyway, we see that we go back to where Shun was being kept, and there's a fire. Everyone's running away, and Katana goes in and talks to the brothel owner and just like, oh, what happened here? And he's like, oh, go away. Some men were looking for you, and they burnt down my building anyway. And he's like, what? Which men? And she's like, oh, if I snitch, they'll come after me again. Just get out of here. And so she makes her way to the bar where she works. And of course, that bar has also been attacked. And just like, oh, some men came in here. I paid protection money from their rackets, but they still destroyed the place. Like, this is hopeless. And so she doesn't know who did it either. She doesn't know if it was Sword Clan or the Daggers. But regardless, Katana puts together like, yeah, this is on me. The place where I worked and the place where I visited often, that's on me. So she goes and talks to Junko, who's watching over Shun, and on the TV is Jack Ryder talking about like a bunch of people who died in some sort of like a parade or something that went wrong. It doesn't matter. And Junko's got hot dogs on the grill, and he's like, hey, Katana, use your coil sword to cut up this coconut. And so she does, and Shun looks at it, and we see them talking more about Jack Ryder, and just like, oh, he's such an opportunist. He's so much of a bad person. He's always there just capitalizing on these horrible things. And he's like, Katana basically says like, hey, Shun, I'm going to fight the Sword and Dagger clan. And she says, okay, but I want to be the one that goes after Coil. And she's like, what? Why? And then Shun takes off her mask, because she's been wearing a mask for a while here, and she has spiral cuts all up and down her face, saying, Coil's the one who did this to me. I am going to get my revenge. So we go back to Jack Ryder. He just finishes reporting on whatever the hell that was. And then we see him say like, oh man, I feel so rough. I could really use a drink. And we see standing behind him is the ghost form of the Creeper. So yeah. So anyway, Katana and Shun make their way to the Dragon House, which is in the mountains above San Francisco, which is just a building that looks like a dragon. And they climb up into it. They get attacked by a bunch of Dagger Clan and Sword Clan people. She goes jumping around all over the dragon, trying to find wherever Coil is. And finally, she jumps into the mouth of the dragon, and she comes across Sickle. And her and Sickle cross for a second, and then they see the ghost of Maceo, her husband, in the reflection of the swords. And Maceo says, like, hey, stop it, you're going to make her remember that night. And she's like, what are you talking about? And he's like, no, please, don't remember that night. And then all of a sudden, Sickle's like, hey, look into your sword, and you'll remember that night. Okay, so here's the thing. Katana, Sickle and Maceo were brothers. Katana was a young girl, and she fell in love with both of them. She admired Maceo because he was stable, and loved Sickle, whatever his name actually was, because he was rough and, a bad boy. And so eventually she's like, hey, I want to settle down. I married Maceo. But he never quite thought that she fully stopped loving Sickle, so there was always that little bit of tension. She became a housewife, and her husband was working as basically a hitman, more or less, using his sword abilities. And he's like, hey, I've got this job tonight if you want to come after. And she says, sure. So they both go to attack this guy who apparently has been attacking young girls. At least that's what Maceo tells Katana. Turns out that's not the truth. So when they get back, he's dead quiet. She thinks something's wrong. He tells her just go to bed. And as she goes to bed, she hears Sickle coming inside. And he's like, this isn't what we do, brother. It's not the outsider's way. And he's like, this isn't about the job. This is about how you want my wife, isn't it? And so Maceo holds a sword to Sickle's throat. Katana busts in and separates him, saying, no, don't kill your brother. And in doing so, the sword goes into Maceo's throat. And Maceo's, in his dying breath, says, you always loved him more than me, as his soul is bonded to the sword forever. So then they set fire to the house, and she goes on her own way. So Katana remembers, oh, that's right, Sickle isn't the one who killed his brother. It was me. I did it. And Maceo says, yep, and now that you know the truth, I'm out. Take care of my wife, bro. And he just leaves. And so at that point, they get fired upon. Sickle and Katana jump down to see that Coil has taken Shun. And she's like, Katana, you have joined up with Sickle, you betrayers, whatnot. But regardless, you'll have to fight through the whole Sword Clan to get to us. And he rips off part of Shun's clothes to expose the tattoo on her stomach, which is Katana, very clearly Katana, in front of the world that's just on fire with the dragon wrapped around it, saying, your Soul Taker sword will unleash an apocalypse of hellfire upon the world. And so Coil uses his sword to grab hold of the Soul Taker and says, to rule the Sword Clan, you have to beat me first. It wasn't an awful issue, but I still just, don't get it. I feel like there's some underlying theme or some panel I am missing here every time I read an issue that just explains the through line, because I just don't get. Clearly we have established that Coil is evil, Sickle might be okay, Maceo, he enjoys seeing his wife with his brother, I guess. I don't know what's going on there. And then we introduce this whole Shun thing of Shun's actually a warrior, which didn't see that coming. And then we keep cutting over to Jack Ryder. I don't give a crap about Jack Ryder. Why do I have to give... it's just, there's so much going on in this book. It doesn't have any sort of focus. It's the same problem I have with all of Ann Nocenti's books. It just feels like it was written... Ann Nocenti knows what the plot is, and we're just getting all the quote-unquote cool moments without the underlying foundation and backstory of, how do these people know each other? Why do they care about this thing? I don't get any of that. So this issue, while not as bad as previous issues, definitely can't spark any higher than a 6. And in fact, I think I'm going to go ahead and just drop it down to the 5, because it's not good. It's not awful. It's not making me hate this book. It's just every time I come to it, I'm like, ugh, all right, sure, why not? So yeah, that's 5 material. World's Finest number 15, written by Paul Levitz, art by Emanuela, Lupacchino. So last issue, we had Helena get taken into a boom tube to see Desaad, and Karen went with. This issue was like 3 pages of actual content and then a lot of fighting. So Karen goes through the boom tube. She's totally disoriented, and finally she's like, oh, hey, there's the exit. And as she goes through, she gets zapped by some parademons, and then immediately starts just tearing apart these parademons. Just like, hey, where's your boss? Where's my friend? Tell me now or I'm going to bring this whole building down on you. And they just start running away, and she's like, wrong answer, and brings the whole building down on them. Meanwhile, we see Helena is being interrogated by Desaad, and Desaad's like, yes, I've enjoyed the chase of you running, but now it is time to taste you once and for all when the nice pheromones that you've built up. They're like pheromones, but fear. And so he rips off her cape and therefore part like the top corner of her costume, and then threatens her with some sort of electricity. And we see Karen just still going through, kicking ass of all the parademons, really fighting against them. She does mention how she's feeling a little bit sluggish. She doesn't feel like she's at her 100% right now, but regardless, we see Desaad is seeing Karen come at them on the monitors, and it's just like, crap. All right, look, I really wanted to deal with her later. She showed up now. This is a problem, so I'm going to go ahead and just let you go because I really don't want to be here for this. I'll get you later. So he goes off and he's like, all right, look, whatever. I'm going to go deal with her, try to get her to knock him in here. But like more or less he's setting her free. But she's still trapped in a chair, and she's like, oh no, I'm not going to just wait here for him. So she pops out some claws on her gloves that she rarely uses because obviously her mom was Catwoman, and uses them to bust out of one of the shackles. And then she uses her Batman lock-picking skills to get out of the other ones. And as she stands up, this big brute comes in and just like, boss said you were to stay in chair. And Helena just kicks him in the face, punches him a few times, takes him down. And immediately he's like, oh, you are master now. And she's like, ew, no, get away. So Helena finally makes her way, or not Helena, Karen finally makes her way down the hall, finds Desaad, and Desaad's like, hey, I'm going to stop you from tearing apart this place. She's like, psh, try it. So she gets zapped with whatever electric tools he has, and it does manage to do a little bit of damage. And at that point, he's attacked by an arrow. Helena's firing it off at him, and he's just like, oh, okay, you guys took out my men, and I really cannot take you both at the same time. So regardless, I'm going to let you ripen a bit more, get some more pheromones, and then I'll pull you back. Bye. And so he boom tubes them back to Earth, seemingly. They show up in a random place, but they're like, oh, are we back home? Why did he just toss us back? And he's just like, I don't know. He tossed us back like we were fish that were too small. What the heck? I feel like this is not the right way to build this up. But regardless, they are happy to be home. But Karen looks down and realizes that she actually has been cut up and like is bleeding a bit. So her powers are not working as usual. So that's the cliffhanger there. It's a short issue. Honestly, I was reading through it. I thought there was more when I got to the end, and then I was like, oh, that was it. Because it's just one long extended fight scene, as like 3 of these past issues have been. Which is a problem. It is a problem of pacing in that these books are like $3.99. And to not feel like I got more out of it than that, like, it's a problem. All in all, I would say this is probably close. This is like it's a 6.5. I'd give it a 6, but Lupacchino's art is fantastic. It does really look great throughout. Don't have any issues with that. So 6.5 is really, really come down on. But the biggest problem I'm having is the fact of it doesn't feel like any of these comics have enough content to justify their existence. Like, we had an extended fight scene, and all it basically amounted to was they get back to Earth and Karen's powers are messed up. Like, they didn't even beat the bad guy. It just ended. So I want more out of my books than that. I'm all for a good decompression when it has a purpose. This doesn't feel like it has a purpose. So 6.5. Suicide Squad number 23, written by Alice Cott, art by Rick Leonardi. So last issue had a whole thing of them taking down this big body of other bodies, and it was in Vegas. Honestly, none of it matters. The only thing that happened at the very end was that it was revealed that the resurrection formula that they were using is temporary, and it will end up killing Deadshot and Amanda Waller, because apparently she's used it too. So we see Waller is basically saying, hey, everything that's happened since the hack that allowed Harley to make a better deal with them and take over has all been orchestrated by a man named John Lynch. John Lynch was on Team 7 along with Amanda Waller. She shot him in the head because he went a little bit cuckoo, but apparently he survived. So as she's explaining this to James Gordon Jr., in his mind is playing the lyrics of I Want to Know What Love Is. I love that bit. I don't know why. He literally says, I want to know what love is. I want you to show me. It's perfect. So we see out in a foreign country, I'm sure we'll get the name of it later, Deadshot, Harley, Cheetah, and King Shark are each doing different things. Deadshot's just eating a sandwich. He's taking out a guard and he's got a sniper rifle set up. Harley's trying to go up to some other guards with a basket full of pies and guns. Cheetah is manipulating bees outside of a minefield, and King Shark, it says, working up an appetite as he stares at a guard. So Waller gives the backstory of Team 7 and all that to James Gordon Jr. and just like, okay, what was he doing so wrong? And it's just like, I don't know, he was just an evil guy. What does he need? And it's like, well, you're using a bunch of prisoners to use drones, so that seems like, calling the kettle black, right? And it's like, nah, they're death row prisoners, totally different. So regardless, Gordon Jr. is just like, okay, well, whatever. Either way, you're the best boss I ever had. I hope this, is there any news on the resurrection juice stuff? And it's just like, no, I mean, yes, but right now we got to take care of Lynch. So turns out Lynch is talking to a dictator. It actually just says some country far away. And the dictator has talking to Lynch, and Lynch is basically saying like, yeah, no, look, we'll go ahead and work through this plan. You've got some big oil and gas reserves. Like, we're going to help you maintain control of them, but in return we get however much of the profits. So he's like, oh, and like, what's your plan? He's like, well, we've got a safe room and we're just going to put you in it and we'll take care of the rest. And it's like, okay, and if I don't come out of that safe room, you do understand you're a dead man, right? And he's like, yeah, no, totally, of course. So at this point, we see what the plan from Harley was, and that is that the bombs in their neck have all been removed, everyone totally bomb-free, and they are free to go after a year. After that year, they are still going to be informants for the rest of their life, but they don't have to be part of the squad. So that's the plan. So back to now, we see the plan starts going into action. Deadshot gets ready next to his gun. King Shark kills some guards and like, he basically says, like, this meat doesn't smell good anymore. Harley walks up to the guards protecting the palace, and he's like, oh, don't freak out. I'm here with Murders Without Borders. And Cheetah starts running through the minefield outside of the general's office, and Lynch and the general see this, and it's like, what the heck is that? It's like, oh, that's Cheetah. She's outrunning the explosives. Sorry. And Lynch is like, yeah, no, this is Waller. He's got it all over it. Don't worry. We've got our own team. They took care of it. And as he stands there in the window and calls his own team, Deadshot shoots Lynch through the face, and he doesn't die, but the general's immediately like shuffled away. And Lynch is like, okay, team, definitely move now. So going up against Harley, who's killed a bunch of the guards, is someone named Crow Jane. We've got a guy named Lamplight going up against King Shark. We have a speedster named Impetus who goes up to Cheetah and says, on the ground, wench. And we have a woman dressed kind of like Wonder Woman who is standing on the back of Deadshot. And Deadshot's like, if you don't get off my back, beautiful, I'm not going to be able to kiss you. And she's like, I'm not impressed. So first we go to Lamplight, who tries to blast King Shark. King Shark just backhands him and says, I'm going to throw you into the ocean. You're going to live, but you will remember that I gave you mercy. And so he immediately Lamplight's out. We see another hero named Titan comes up, and he's like a wannabe Superman. And he's the one protecting Lynch. And he's like, why are we even walking when you can teleport? But regardless, the general makes his way into the safe room. We see that the bees from earlier are special bees that James Gordon Jr. trained to send out to take out a minefield because they can smell the TNT or whatever. They just start attacking Impetus, and she just like, all right, well, that's what you get for calling me a wench. We see Harley is facing down Crow Jane, who I guess has sonic scream powers, but before she can use them, Harley throws a pie in her face, and the pie has a landmine in it, so Crow Jane is dead. And then we see Deadshot and Amaze making out on the battlefield, because apparently Deadshot, it was Gordon Jr.'s plan to give Deadshot some super extreme pheromones that would make it so Amaze could not possibly resist him. And they're just watching through the cameras with like popcorn. Waller and Gordon are. So finally, Titan comes up along with Lynch, separates the two of them, and he's like, I hate weakness. I love purity. And Deadshot's like, hey, don't blame her. She couldn't help herself. I'm just that attractive to her. And so she gets knocked out. Deadshot's thrown to the side. And we see that Waller, once Lynch is out in the open here, has sent in numerous drones, and I mean like at least 12, all armed with warheads, and drops them on Lynch so that he was not able to survive it. And in Lynch's final moments, he says, this was never just about you. You have no idea. I had plans. And then Titan and Lynch are blown up. Deadshot and Amaze manage to get away, and he's like, hey, sorry about that. The pheromone should be wearing off. It wasn't my plan, but if you got to do this, make it look good. And so she punches him in the face, knocks him out. We see King Shark comes across them. The general, who's in a safe room with two guards, is like, oh, do they think I'm just going to surrender? And then one of the guards turns out to be Unknown Soldier, who just shoots him in the head, being like, nah, they didn't expect you to surrender. So all of them get into the helicopter. They start taking off. King Shark says, hey, Deadshot, if you're free, I'd love to take you out for dinner. And Deadshot's like, what? What's going on right now? And he's like staring at him, and Deadshot's like, are you smiling at me? And King Shark's like, maybe. So I think King Shark has gotten the smell of the pheromones and is into Deadshot. But as we go back, we see that James Gordon Jr. is still staring down Waller, and it's just like, oh, I'm falling in love with you. I'm hope that you feel the same about me one day. And on the cameras, as everybody flies out, we see two figures flying in to where the Suicide Squad just departed from, and we don't know who they are. But that's that. This is a weird issue, man. This is such, like, it's so, you know what it is? It is James Gunn's Suicide Squad levels of just like zaniness and weirdness. But I like it, it's fun. It's a fun time throughout. It is kind of hard to follow at times because there is just so much going on, but all in all, the plots are pretty basic. So it's not that hard to, once you're done with it, think back through it and say, oh, okay, so this is what was going on and da-da-da. So yeah, it's weird, but it's a beautiful weird. So I'm going to give this a 7.5. The only thing keeping me from the 8 is that some of the faces from Leonardi here are just weird, especially one cheetah panel, which I had to stop for a moment just to specifically take note of how wrong Cheetah's face looked. Like, it's awful. I can't even begin to describe it. But yeah, 7.5 still, though. I really do like the direction this book is taking. Constantine number 6, written by Ray Fawkes, art by Renato Guedes. So last issue was a tie-in to Trinity War, and long story short, Constantine is bleeding out and is like about to die. And his ghost is currently floating above his body and meets up with the ghost of Chris, the guy who he let die in issue 1. So we see that Constantine is bleeding out. He's friend, Lloyd, who runs the bar he's in, is making a call to Zatanna because Constantine said, hey, if I'm ever in real trouble, call Zatanna, not 911. And so he's doing so, but Zatanna's not picking up. So we see above the body, Chris is trying to attack Constantine, and he's just like, oh yeah, you let me die, and now I'm going to have my revenge. I'm going to get you. Just gonna sever that cord that's connecting you to your body. And Constantine's like, yeah, that's not what's gonna happen. Also, you don't understand anything about fighting in like the incorporeal sense. It's not about strength. It's not about throwing a punch. It's about willpower. And so Constantine just wills that he blasts back Chris and he knocks him on his ass. And then Chris gets up and he's like, oh no, you're not stronger than me. I've been making deals here in the afterlife. And he sprouts like these giant spider legs from his back. And Constantine's like, oh, you idiot. So then we cut to Switzerland, where there's a man with a sword in front of a cult, and it's the Temple of the Cold Flame, and he's saying this whole incantation about like angels and stuff like that. And he's wearing a blindfold. He's unable to see this whole time. I feel like we may have met this guy before, or at least seen him, but he's not springing to mind. So at this point, we see that in the back of the room, Sargon and Mr. E are standing there, and they interrupt his little cult thing, and he's just like, all right, what do you guys want? And they basically say, Constantine is about to die, and we need your help to make it so that he doesn't right now. And it's like, why would you want him to live? And they explain that, they need to claim his soul. If it moves on without, then that's it. They lose their chance. So this guy, whose name is Tanarak, he takes two of his followers. He calls them up, chops off their heads, and they shatter like porcelain. And from inside their bodies come two black soul-looking things. And he's like, all right, I'm sending them and a couple of my other goons to go take care of Constantine. They'll be fine. So sends them off. We see the goons enter into the bar, and Lloyd just immediately opens up with shotgun blasts on him. And he's badass. He's really going for it. So in the ethereal realm, we see Chris is fighting against Constantine. And Constantine's trying to talk him down. He's like, hey, you're not thinking straight. Your anger's getting the best of you. It's twisting up your spirit. You got to let this go. And Chris is like, no, this is it. I'm taking you out. How dare you? You let me die. And he's like, dude, you were channeling an unreal amount of power. And I already did the math. You would have been dead in like 6 months tops. So I was just letting you die without going through the incredible pain you were going to go through later. Also, I got something out of it. So it's a win-win for everybody. But at that point, the two black souls show up. They grab Chris. And Constantine's like, what? What's going on? So then we cut to Tanarak, who's like flying over top of the city. And he's looking around for Constantine's like soul trail and trying to see where that is, and he sees this whole map across the city. So Chris is being taken by the black souls, and Constantine's like, Chris, just calm down. They're only coming after you because you're angry. It's you got to just let it go. And he's unable to do anything as the soul takes him. And the other black soul stares at Constantine, and Constantine's like, all right, well, I don't even care about you. You're like nothing to me. So he just tells him to piss off, and he leaves. So at that point, he looks down and he sees Lloyd still beating up all the guys coming in. He's just like, wow, that's pretty incredible, Lloyd. You're doing a great job there. So at that point, Papa Midnight comes in, takes out the rest of the guys, and looks down at Constantine's body. And he's like, okay, yeah, I can help him, but why should I? And Lloyd's like, come on, man, just do it. And Constantine's standing above like, all right, Papa Midnight, time for you to do a pros and cons list. Figure out if I'm worth saving. So we cut back to Tanarak, who's managed to track down where Constantine's like home base is underneath the pet store. He cuts his way in with the sword. And the woman inside is like, oh, I'm calling the police. You can't be in here. And we just hear a thud, implying that woman is no more. So Papa Midnight finally does come, and he listens, and he says, yeah, okay, I'm going to save Constantine. He tells Lloyd to lead, though, because it's apparently a gruesome sight. So he uses his magic, and he does this whole big blood thing. I mean, he says here, there's a cracking sound from everywhere. His chants are answered by a voice from everywhere. And then all of a sudden, his blood rips through his heart. His lungs draw their breath. He screams and he can't stop screaming. And finally, he is seemingly brought back to life, but we don't actually see it happen. And the final page is Tanarak has made his way into the room where Constantine keeps all of his magical doodads and knickknacks. And he's like, all right, cool. Everything Constantine took from us, it's mine now, bitches. So, yeah, that's transitionary point. I mean, I'm interested in it. I do think that it's a good okay. What's the best way to say this? The tie-in to Trinity War could have just been its own thing. It could have been completely separate and not really impact the plot of Constantine all that much, especially with how episodic Constantine's plot has been. I appreciate the fact that they are allowing this to impact. Like, he bled out and it is changing the status quo of now, like, he owes Papa Midnight and the villains have all of his stuff and people have died because of him. And, like, Constantine even notes the fact of, like, it's weird that Papa Midnight cared enough to tell Lloyd to get out of there. Maybe Papa Midnight has plans for him. It's weird that the Black Souls came after Chris because obviously they were meant to come after Constantine. So it's setting up a lot of threads here that feel like they're going to be pushing the story forward more as it goes on. I feel like the first arc of this was more so just testing, hey, is this book going to survive more than 6 issues? Like, are we actually going to be able to do a larger story here? And now that they've seen that, I guess the numbers are there, they're pushing forward. So I'm super into it. I'm looking forward to it. I'm going to give this one... I'll give this one like a... I'll give it a 7.5. It doesn't quite strike that 8 for me. It's held back a little bit, mainly because it's setting up a bunch of mysteries without actually doing any major pushing forward of other things. It feels more like a setup issue than it does a conclusion sort of issue. But I still enjoyed it regardless, just for the promise that it brings. So 7.5 for this. Looking forward to the rest. Demon Knights number 23, written by Robert Venditti, art by Phil Winslade. So this is the final issue of the series. And last issue we had the Holy Grail was of course found. They accidentally let it loose and the issue ends with Horsewoman is now able to walk. Also, a bunch of giants are being led on attack on the city by Vandal Savage. So this issue picks up with Horsewoman being like, oh my god, I can stand. What's going on here? And we see everyone's just like, I don't know, this is like something crazy. This is beyond science. There's no idea what this could be. And Sir Euston pops in and is just like, no, guys, this is the Grail. Like, look at all this grass and like forestry that has popped up just in the Grail's presence. It's a healing thing. Heck, I'm not even affected by vampires anymore. Look, my bite's gone. And Exoristos is super happy about that and starts hugging Sir Euston. And as soon as they manage to clear their minds for even a second, the giants start firing away with their cannons again, and everyone starts getting blown up, and Algebir's like, oh, right, that's happening. So what can we do to stop that army? And everyone starts throwing out plans of like, well, will the walls of your city hold? And he's like, not against them, they're giants. Like, that's an issue. And finally, he comes to a little bit of an idea. He's like, okay, hold on, I do have a tiny little thought. I'm going to need your help, Xanadu. Everyone else head out to the front lines, join the cavalry. And Exoristos is like, okay, but if we die here, if this is the end, Algebir, I left a box here, and it's probably giving you a lot of trouble. I left it locked up. I have the key. The key is yours. I entrust you with its horrible, horrible power. So at that point, we see them all make their way out to the front line. Jason Blood is like, yeah, I guess I need to call up Etrigan, don't I? This is kind of his deal. All right, let's go. He transforms into Etrigan. And Sir Euston tells all the knights around, like, nobody worry, the demon fights with us. And Etrigan's like, no, I don't. And he's like, well, Xanadu's up helping Algebir, so you gotta fight with us for her. And he's like, ugh, fine, whatever. So they open up the gates. They go out. They approach the oncoming giant army. A lot of men are knocked down. A lot of them are unable to fight against, but the Demon Knights come up. Exoristos smashes one of them in the nuts with her hammer, And we see one of them is holding a giant cartoon style bomb, like the black circle with a wick coming out of it. And Vandal Savage is still stuck in his cage, and he's like, "Oh, I watch out for the demon, you guys." And they're like, "What?" And then Etrigan lights the bomb on fire, which causes a huge explosion that also seems to destroy Vandal Savage. Wink. So Sir Euston and everyone else attacks, and they say like, "Oh, it's too hard down here on the ground. They're giants. They can just stomp us. We need some way to attack from the air." And at that point, Al-Jabir comes in. He's made balloons. And he's using Xanadu's magic to basically guide the winds so that they can fly into place. And as they fly over top of the giant's reach, they throw down a volley of arrows so that the giants can be attacked from above. And some of the giants like throw up hammers and stuff like that. They knock a few balloons out of the sky. But for the most part, they take out a few of the giants and manage to make their escape. And the cavalry goes back into the walls, and Xanadu says, "Okay, part one of your plan is done. The cavalry is safe. Now what?" And Al-Jabir opens up the box that Exaristos left, and inside is the Black Diamond. And he's like, "All right, if this Black Diamond does what I think it does, this should work out." And Xanadu sees the Black Diamond, feels its effects, and just punches Al-Jabir in the face. He drops the Black Diamond down on the ground beneath, and she's like, "I'm sorry, you did that thing just immediately made me angry." And she's like, "No, it's cool. It's what I was going to do anyway." So one of the giants picks up the Black Diamond on the ground, and immediately all of the giants just get immediate bloodlust and tear each other apart. They're just strangling and hitting and choking and stabbing. All of it. Horrible. And Xanadu's like, "Oh, Jesus. Okay, so this was your plan? You were just going to turn them all on each other so they kill each other?" And it's like, "Yep. Hopefully they do that." So they all manage to fight to a standstill. Just like one or two giants left, and then they just take out the remaining giant. Etrigan, Sir Euston, and Exaristos watch on, and he's like, "Oh yeah, remember Satan was the one? Lucifer gave us the Black Diamond. Hey, Etrigan, when you go back to hell, tell Lucifer how he actually managed to protect the Holy Grail." And Etrigan's like, "Oh yeah, that's going to piss him off. I'll totally do that." So Etrigan goes back, Jason Blood transfers, and he's like, "Oh my god, you guys won. That's awesome." So they question why Al-Jabir wasn't affected, and he's like, "I'm far too logical to be impacted by such emotion." And so they go back out onto the battlefield. He picks up the Black Diamond, and he's like, "I have an idea. I want to try something." So he goes back into a back room, and everyone else just looks at the battlefield. They're like, "Well, guys, we did it." And they see the cage where Vandal Savage was, and it's like, "Maybe we even got rid of Vandal Savage." Wink. So they get called back in by Al-Jabir. Exaristos is like, "I know what this is for. You're upset I had the Black Diamond here. I'm sorry. I promise I will take it and I will guard it myself." And Sir Euston's like, "No, but then I can't be with you." And she's like, "Oh, it's the way things must be. I am forced to live a life alone." And Al-Jabir's like, "Actually, no, I'm totally smart enough. I came up with a thing." And they go into a back room that nobody knows about. And sitting on two pedestals across from each other is the Black Diamond and the Holy Grail. So because the Holy Grail is for life and good and justice and nobility, and the Black Diamond is evil and hatred and anger and violence, because the two are exposed to each other, they cancel out each other's effects. So the room isn't overgrown with forestry or life or anything like that, and the Black Diamond doesn't make anybody want to kill each other. So as long as they're kept together, everything's cool. So Al-Jabir says, like, "Yeah, no, we'll just keep this here and nobody will know about it, and it'll be safe in my walled city." And they say, "Cool. But we still need to find out who these enemies that Merlin was talking about," because I'm pretty sure he wasn't talking about the giants. "Who's after the Holy Grail for real? We have to go out and find that out, maybe even by finding Merlin himself. Let's go, Demon Knights." And they actually say Demon Knights as they ride off into the sunset. That's the issue. I mean, just to stop and not talk about this specific issue for a second, the series as a whole, fantastic. This has always been a fun series. I can't say there was ever really a period in it where I thought it was on a downturn. If anything, the first arc of it was the weakest, and it only got stronger over time. But even then, the first arc was great. It was a fun time. It was just a bit confusing at times to figure out, like, alliances and whose people's names were. But once you get that locked down, this was great. This was a fantastic book overall. So, for this issue, I think it does a good job of wrapping up all the plots. We have the giants were taken care of, and it didn't feel like it wasn't unearned, and it used a little bit of everybody. We had Etrigan doing part of the fight. Horsewoman did something. Algibeer did something. Xanadu did something. It all came together. It felt like an earned victory. And in the end, we managed to actually bring back the Black Diamond, which, frankly, I never wanted to see again. But hey, here we are. So, all things considered, solid read. I enjoyed this book. I'll give this one an 8. Not much more to really say about it. If you haven't checked out Demon Knights, I know that it is out of print and it is extremely hard to find, but if you can find it, it is well worth the read. So Demon Knights is a thumbs up from me. And that's it. That's all the comics that came out from DC Comics this August 14th, 2013. And it's my birthday tomorrow. I know. I should have brought that up in the intro for some reason. Didn't quite jump into my mind until I just said the date there. But yeah, tomorrow's my birthday. And I am turning 30. The big 30. Now, I know there's some people in the audience who are likely over the age of 30, and you sit there and you laugh and you say, ha ha, to be young like you. But, you know, I'm a 30-year-old who collects 10-year-old comics and talks about them on the internet alone every week. To say that I am going through even the mildest of crises mentally would be a bit of an understatement, but that's my thing. That's what I need to deal with. As for you, enjoy the show. Don't worry about my mental health. Ha 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 ha. 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 So, let's talk about comics coming out next week and not think about the unending march of time. So we have Batman and Robin, Batwoman, Birds of Prey, Red Hood and the Outlaws, Supergirl, Superman Unchained, Green Lantern New Guardians, Justice League of America's Vibe, Wonder Woman, Legion of Superheroes, Animal Man, Justice League Dark, and Trinity of Sin Pandora. Out of those that are notable, I'm not really sure. I think that Legion of Superheroes, that's its final issue, so sad to see it go, but not going to miss it when it's gone. And I think Trinity of Sin Pandora is a tie-in to Trinity War, because what else could it possibly be doing right now? Beyond that, everything else is just going to be, yeah, that's cool. Oh, wait, Justice League Dark. Of course, that's the next part of Trinity War. I completely forgot they were part of the Trinity in Trinity War. So yes, that'll be there as well. So be sure to tune in for that. As for your comments, have some. Say what you think. Let me know your thoughts on things. You can hit us up on Discord or Reddit or Patreon, but that costs a little bit extra. But it's worth it, trust me. I've been doing it for years. But yeah, that'll do it for me. Thank you for watching or listening, however you consume this podcast. Be sure, 5 stars, blah, blah. You know the whole deal. I don't need to tell you about that. And always try to remember, if it ain't broke, don't fix it.